Hi, how you doing? Didn't see you there. Welcome to Cold Blood and Cocktails Spooky Edition. As you beautiful people know, any tiff you may have, please cast it away because this is a channel of scariness but positive energy, okay? Okay. I am so freaking excited. It is finally October, and honestly, if every day could be Halloween, I would love that. Some people like Christmas, some people like their birthdays. Nope, not me. If I could do this every day, I could die happy. Which today is a very light makeup day. This is kind of how I feel when I go out in public without any makeup. Praise be for my CC cream. So, how is everyone doing today? Sorry, I've got a little bit of hair in my mouth. I am doing great. Oop, I'm popping out. Pardon me. Oh, actually, that's a little bit too tight. Okay. I am doing very, very good. I'm loving continuing this series. I think this is like our 7th episode, this style. And I keep getting comments asking for more. Trust me, this is not going to stop anytime soon, if ever. But I thought today we'd kind of switch things up. This doesn't technically have anything to do with cold blood, like nobody really dies. But this is still a very interesting story nonetheless. I'm sure by now you've read the title and probably guessed that this is based off the real Exorcist. I've been so fascinated to find the truth behind stories like the real Disney stories, the inspiration behind scary movies. Oh god, there is a big piece of wig hair in my drink. But while doing research for these topics, I found that the Exorcist is actually kind of based off of real events. I mean, go into this with a grain of salt because this is all based off of pretty much hearsay and a little bit that's written down. And before I forget, cheers to you. Today we have amaretto, some vodka, a little bit of mocha syrup, and a splash of grenadine for color. Isn't that pretty? It wasn't a recipe, I just basically mixed shit till it looked red and cute. Ooh, that's good though. Very sweet. Whew. Hold on, what is that light right there? Hold on, we gotta fix this. All right, so let's just hop right into this. This is gonna be a lengthy one, so make sure you grab your snackies, a little drinky. Also, I've been contemplating uploading these as like a podcast just so that people can listen to the audio when they're driving or something. Let me know down in the comments below if I should do that. I don't know if that's like a thing or not, but I do like to listen to this kind of shit when I'm driving. Let me grab my cashew, daddy needs sustenance. Okay, so today's topic is actually kind of serious, but I do kind of have to put in my own little humorous twist in it, otherwise I'll cry. So please, take everything I say very, very lightly. I don't want to offend anybody, but I'm also going to warn you right now. In all of my reading, I deadass thought the main character's name was Ronald, and after days of research, I looked a little bit closer, only to find that his name is actually Roland. Now all I can think of is Roland shit from Schitt's Creek, and it reignited my massive obsession with Dan Levy, so... Okay, girl, you came to me. If anybody's possessed here, it's you. But Roland actually isn't his real name. He was given a pseudonym just to protect his privacy. I know his real name is out there, but I don't even know what it is, and honestly, it doesn't even matter. And because this whole ordeal was kind of on the hush-hush, there aren't a ton of pictures, and this was a while back, but I will try my best to include everything that I can find. And lastly, this is a very graphic story with gore and violence, adult language, we're talking about demonic possession, so hide your kids, hide your wife, buckle up, and prepare yourself. All right, my love chops, let me give this a little fluff, and here we go. On December 26th of 1973, the day after Christmas, people line up for blocks waiting for the highly anticipated movie, The Exorcist. People had no idea what the fuck they were in for. Like, this movie was unlike anything any of these people in line had ever seen before. People even left in the first half of the movie because they were too scared to finish it. In fact, some people were actually passing out from fear within the first half an hour of the movie. Some even fainted within like the first 10 minutes, and one lady, when she fainted, she broke her jaw going down and sued Universal. Like, this movie was revolutionary in the scare game. Now, with today's technology, it's just small cookies, but then if you weren't used to like horrific images, this shit could fuck you up. And what's even scarier is that it's kind of based on true events. I'm not saying everything in The Exorcist happened. We all know how Hollywood is. Sweet Holly and her wood is literally the most dramatic gal ever. Anytime Hollywood can add a little bit of juice for effect, you can bet your salty nips that juice cup will runneth over. Quick recap though, if you've never seen The Exorcist, it's pretty much about a young girl who becomes violently possessed by a demon, and the young girl then has to be exorcised, not exorcised like crunches and thirsty mirror pics at the gym, but exorcised as in getting the demon out of her body. The little girl's head spins around, her voice gets fucked up, her eyes turn milky, it's some weird ass shit. By the end of the video, she literally looks like this. And not that this really has anything to do with today's story, but this film is actually one of several cursed films, meaning the cast and crew who are filming this video had several deaths and near fatal incidents happen during filming and right after filming. Like, that shit is freaky, and I think we have our very first suspicious shot before the story even freaking starts. Anyways, this story really plays at one of people's biggest fear, not fear of heights, but actually of the devil. This could be real, this could be fiction. I wasn't there, so who knows? But regardless, this is a scary-ass story. I'm just here to dress up and tell you a tale based on what I've watched and what I've researched. With that being said, several people who have witnessed much scarier things than I ever have will tell you that something kind of like what you see on The Exorcist actually does happen when people are possessed, albeit much more tame. Heads going in weird direction, crawling on the ground like spiders, weird voices coming out of people that isn't their voice. A lot of people have even reported levitation, so like some weird freaky shit can happen, I guess. And way back in the 70s, after The Exorcist was launched, the Catholic Church saw a huge spike in people who claimed they needed an exorcism performed on them. I have a few family members that I think could probably use that, but we won't touch that today. It literally became so popular to be exorcised that there was actually a waiting list. It was like when Farrah Fawcett had that one hairdo and suddenly everyone wanted it, except with a demon. However, for a lot of people, it actually seemed like this wasn't a fad. Priests were reporting eyes rolling in the back of people's heads, foaming at the mouth, sudden convulsions, and like we said earlier, with a few cases, levitation. Well, the author of The Exorcist loosely based his version not off of a young girl, which was pictured in the films, but after a young boy. The boy's name was Roland Doe, who the author actually heard about while attending Georgetown. He was an English major at the time, and one of the Jesuits approached him and told him about Roland. That particular person seemed to have a lot of information that most of the public didn't, from one-on-one interviews to documents, and it gave the author enough information to kind of form a story. However, the movie and the book really only covered a fraction of what actually happened. Apparently, there was a secret diary kept from over 70 years ago that documented almost everything. So let's take it back to Maryland in 1949. Roland Doe is a pretty happy boy. He's an only child and he lives with his parents in Cottage City, a little burb right outside of DC. At school, Roland wasn't a bad student. He was just very, very hyperactive. He just had a lot of trouble focusing, which kind of landed him in quite a few sticky situations. And he did have friends at school. They were fine, but he wanted somebody he could really connect with, which turned out to be his Aunt Tilly. Tilly was a wild one. She sounded fun. She dabbled in psychic readings and tarot cards, and she loved to talk to the dead. In fact, one of her favorite things was to use her Ouija board. Ooh, have you ever heard of those? She was really into talking with people who have passed over, and she kind of introduced that to Roland too, and he found himself pretty equally as interested. So they would hang out and play with the spirit board, which is basically like a game board that has an alphabet on there, yes, no, and some numbers. Any amount of people can play, but whoever is playing has to put their hand on this little glass piece that kind of hovers over the board, and if a spirit wants to communicate, it'll move everyone's hand in the direction of letters and it'll spell things out. If I played, mine would probably spell out cheap ass or something. But no matter what you believe, like, in all honesty, these boards are not for the faint of heart. Like, I even have family who is fucked up from playing with one years ago. Shit can happen, honey. Like, no ma'am. But Roland and his aunt had thought this board was just interesting. They had no idea the kind of fuckery that they were in for. But basically, a lot of people view these boards as invitations for spirits, dead people, demons, whatever, to cross into our world. And most people involved with Roland's case believe that that's where all the shit started. Get ready, folks. Not long after Roland and his aunt use this board, his mom starts hearing weird noises around the house. It was almost like something with claws was just inside the wall, slowly scratching down. Roland's dad did what probably anyone would do and instantly called the exterminator. He thought it was rats or a possum or something. But the exterminator came, saw nothing, and they left, so the parents thought that, well, Roland, being the prankster that he is, must just be playing a little joke on us. I guess Roland was kind of known to act out of order, so they thought this is just a phase, he'll grow out of it, and they ignored the sounds. As time moved on, though, the noises didn't really stop, and Roland's mother was starting to get very suspicious. She was like, fuck, I think my house might be haunted. Suspicious shot for you, mama, because that shit is scary as hell. 11 days after the scratching begins, Roland and his family gets completely life-altering news that totally crushes Roland. His Aunt Tilly, who shared the passion of the Ouija board with him, had abruptly died. This was Roland's favorite aunt, his only real friend. And he felt so broken down, so defeated, and he became very vulnerable. And soon after Tilly's death, Roland and his mother start hearing different sounds than just the scratching. And this this wasn't in anybody's head either. Like, Roland and his mother were hearing the exact same thing, what sounded like a bunch of people marching in unison towards Roland's room. And they're freaking the fuck out because as the steps are drawing closer, the walls are shaking and the whole house feels like it's moving. And through all this tumultuous noise, Roland's mom yells out and says, "Tilly, if this is you, send us a message, knock 3 times. And suddenly all of the noise stops. And do you know what they heard? And so they think, whew, okay, this isn't dangerous. This is just Aunt Tilly doing her thing, trying to communicate with us from the other side. And so they let their guards down a bit. But if these knocks were truly coming from sweet Aunt Tilly, why would she be taunting them with all these loud noises? Maybe, just maybe, he attracted something else. Oh, hold on. Well, time moves on, but these weird incidents keep happening. Cupboards would randomly open, dishes would move around, the table would rumble, chairs would spin or just slide across the room. And this was happening almost every night after Roland would go to bed. In my mind, I picture this comical scene where a piece of toast flies across the room, someone catches it for breakfast, maybe a saucer and a cup of coffee along with it, you know, making the demon work for you. But sadly, that wasn't the case. Like, for a moment, shit would be peaceful when they turned out the lights at night, and then all of a sudden the bed would start shaking and shit would start moving. And then as the night carried on, it would progressively get worse. This tiny 13-year-old boy would be sitting in the middle of his shaking bed, scared shitless, and the mattress would be moving so much that it would shake off of the box spring. And if that's not enough to leave a skid mark in your whitey tighties, oftentimes Roland would wake up and use a voice that was not his at all. It was as if something were inside of him talking through him. Of course, this didn't go unnoticed. Obviously, the neighbors started talking about the shit that goes bump in the night at Roland's house. Everyone around their house could hear the screaming, the yelling, the banging. So this wasn't something just between the family members. There were so many people that witnessed all the shit that they went through. But the neighbors thought, oh, that Roland, he is such a handful. He is just a troubled kid. They didn't know that the kid was actually possessed, because this isn't even 1950 yet. So people are like, possession? Who's she? But people outside of Roland's house were starting to catch on because it wasn't just inside his home that shit was happening. He would experience paranormal activity basically everywhere that he went. While he was at school during class, books, papers, pencils, anything around him on his desk would just fly off of it. And in several cases, his school desk would actually start vibrating and moving across the floor. But sadly, because he was kind of known as being a prankster, the teachers thought that he was just pulling a fast one and they kind of scolded him. Like, whether or not this actually happened, how freaking frustrating would it be to be terrorized by something unseen and have everyone just think that you're playing a practical joke on them? This really affected Roland so much that he stops going to school altogether, and people don't know if he's just got some mental issues or what the hell is happening. At this point, during the middle of every night, Roland would wake up convulsing, and his parents knew that he probably wasn't doing this naturally, and they thought maybe this is an illness we don't know about, so they took him to a specialist. Roland goes to the doctor's office and walks out with a perfectly clean bill of health. The doctor says, you have no kind of illness that'll alter your physical or mental state. You're perfectly fine. So the parents say, let's take him to a psychologist. Maybe he has manic depression or schizophrenia. In those days, those two terms were very popular to throw around, so if you had anything wrong with you, it was probably one of those two. Remember, this was 1949, so psychiatry really wasn't at the height of its heyday, but with what they did have, they too determined that Roland was perfectly fine. He's just a normal, everyday kid who just has a little bit of energy and is probably acting out. So his parents take him to several more specialists, all who agree that yes, he's high-strung, but otherwise he's perfectly fine. Nobody could figure out what was happening because what was happening was way beyond any explanation that psychology could offer. Like, there was just way too much freaky shit happening both to Roland and around the house for this to be something natural. So if the medical community can't help Roland, the next step his parents wanted to take was religious intervention. Roland's mom talked to their pastor, Reverend Schultz, who happened to be very interested in parapsychology, which in a basic nutshell is like the study of mental phenomena that really can't be explained by normal psychology. And Reverend Schultz thinks maybe there's a poltergeist in their house. A poltergeist is a ghost or an energy that'll slam doors, shut lights off suddenly, drain the batteries from your vibrator, just wreak havoc on your life. And they thought that is it, because this totally described exactly what was happening in the house. But Schultz was also a skeptic, so he asked if he could observe Roland outside of the house to see if it followed him. Since a poltergeist typically didn't go from home to home, if Roland was still having these supernatural experiences outside of his house, they could rule a poltergeist out. So they make a plan. Schultz says, okay, Roland, come over and stay the night with my wife and I, and we can observe you. They all snuggle in their own beds, it's cozy and warm, and they shut the lights out to go to sleep. And the moment light leaves the room, Roland's bed begins shaking violently, and Schultz flips the light switch thinking that Roland is pranking him. He soon realizes that there is no way this this scrawny little kid could ever make this huge bed move, so he says, okay, I can fix this. Why don't you go to sleep in the armchair across the room? Roland's like, okay, whatever you say. So he goes, he sits in the chair, he gets all snuggled in with the comforter, and within a second of the calm, the chair begins spinning and shaking side to side violently, so hard that it flips backwards and tips Roland out of it. Schultz is like, what the hellish fuck is happening, bro? So Schultz pulls a mattress off of the bed, puts it down next to his, and tells Roland to sleep right next to my bed, and I can keep an eye right on you. Poor kid just wants a damn minute of shut-eye. Well, just as Roland closes his eyes, his mattress is sucked under Schultz's bed and pushed up against the box spring, smushing his face. And Schultz is like, okay, this is not a poltergeist. And so now what started off as simple bed shaking was getting pretty physical. Over the course of the next 4 days, each night Roland would wake up with 3 long scratches down his arm, and they'd get deeper and deeper each night, almost as if some invisible thing took claws and just dug them into him. Could these be the same claws that had been scratching inside the walls earlier? Maybe even the same thing that knocked 3 times and said it was Aunt Tilly? Don't think it was Aunt Tilly. Schultz, who is Lutheran, wants so badly to help Roland, but he knows this is beyond his expertise. So he suggests Roland be taken to a Catholic priest because they might know a little bit more about being possessed. When Roland entered the priest's office, everyone felt that the room went so cold that you could almost see your breath. The telephone went sliding off of the priest's desk, and this voice erupted out of Roland that was not his. A voice that was screaming serious profanities at this priest. I know teenagers can be moody, we've all been there, but this was a bit much. The pastor's name was Father Hughes, and immediately he knew that there was some kind of dark entity inside of Roland. Could this be the devil himself? Hughes thought so, but he was like, why? Just like so many people would later think, Hughes was the first person to believe that when Roland was trying to communicate with the dead, this gave a demon the opportunity to sashay in, purse first, and take control over Roland's body. And he thought there were multiple gateways for the devil to be able to attach itself to you. They could slip through the cracks of somebody's mind who might be a little bit more vulnerable, maybe somebody who's trying to get over a family death. After all, there are haunted places, why wouldn't there be haunted people? Hughes sees this as a dire situation, so he contacts Archbishop O'Boyle in Washington, D.C. and requests an exorcism. And Hughes was adamant about this. Like, you can't just walk up to any archbishop and request an exorcism. It has to be proven that real shit is happening. And the archbishop was absolutely convinced. So Roland is admitted into a mental facility under the pseudonym Roland Doe, and he's strapped by his wrists, he's strapped by his ankles. Like, there's no way this kid can move. And by now, Roland is anything but himself, especially with Father Hughes by his side reading the prayers of exorcism. This young kid is writhing and screaming in what sounds like agony, and whatever's inside of Roland pulls his hand out of the restraint, and a witness viewing all this sees Roland reach under the bed, grab a spring, and hurl the curved end of it into Father Hughes' arm. Roland then pulls this piece of metal down Father Hughes' arm from shoulder to fingertips, and he ends up needing 100 stitches. And anyone who knew Father Hughes said that after that incident, he was not the same, and he did suffer lifelong issues with that arm. Well, somehow, a few days later, Roland was discharged from the hospital, but he plunges headfirst deeper into this demonic possession. Roland's first night back after getting released, he's getting ready for bed, he's buttoning up his nightshirt, and suddenly he's overcome with a serious pain across his torso like a knife is carving into his skin. He runs to the bathroom, opens up his shirt, and sees on his abdomen the bloody word Lewis etched onto his skin, just like the claw marks had done on his arms a week earlier. Roland's parents think, maybe this is a sign. After all, we do have family in St. Louis, Missouri. Maybe we should head there. This was only a week into the possession, and the family was already at the end of their rope. They were grasping for straws in thin air and had no idea what the hell to do. So a sporadic move to St. Louis, Missouri didn't sound like a bad idea. Maybe their relatives could aid in some kind of spiritual or mental help. Whatever you believe, whether this was mental or actually a possession, whatever, it was enough to make the family up and move quite a long distance within the matter of like a day. Like something completely earth-shattering was happening to them. When the family arrives to St. Louis, they immediately move right in with Roland's uncle, who are devout Catholics. They're hoping that just being surrounded by their strong faith will be enough to ward off these evil spirits. And the family welcomed Roland in. They knew him so well, they loved him to death, but they noticed that this isn't the same Roland. Like something was a little bit off, especially at night. And it very quickly became clear that whatever was inside Roland followed him to St. Louis. Just like back at home, he goes to bed and immediately shit starts happening. The bed starts moving, books start flying off shelves. He's screaming and howling, and once again, this poor 13-year-old kid is just terrified. terrified. And his uncle would say that while Roland lived there, the stool that was across the room would always just tip over. Even if they piled books on it or put heavy objects on top, it would just fall over and smash to the ground. And within a few times of that happening, they realized this boy is seriously tormented. Roland's cousin also lived there, and she saw everything that was happening. She at the time was going to university and approached Father Bishop at her school to tell him what was going on and ask for help. Bishop says, okay, why don't I come over tonight and I can observe this young man, and he brought along a man named Father Bowdern for a little bit of extra protection. These are hard times, you can never be too safe. The two men make their way over to Roland's new home. They observe him for well over an hour and nothing happens. They saw absolutely no sign of possession. Honestly, of all the times for the demon to take a lunch break, it had to be now. So the two men leave the house, but the moment they step outside, they instantly hear noises coming up from Roland's bedroom. They hear screams and loud bangs. I guess a bottle of holy water that they had left on the nightstand had hurled its way across the room, and Roland was screaming in fright. By now, he is somewhat used to this, so he tries to fall back asleep, but he's immediately awoken by the sound of a bookshelf somehow moving itself to block his door. So the priests haul ass back inside and they witness all of this happening, which made them realize that sure as shit, there's some kind of demonic action going down here. Father Bowdern knows absolutely nothing about exorcism, so he consults what's called the Roman ritual, which is kind of like a manual from the 17th century that just tells you the rules, the rituals, and prayers that you need to conduct an exorcism. And just as a random ass side note, I guess exorcism isn't specifically a Catholic thing. I guess almost every religion has training on becoming an exorcist of some sort, but I guess at least here in the USA, the Catholic Church is kind of known for their exorcisms. I'm not an expert, so I don't know. Anyways, back in the 40s, exorcism wasn't quite as popular as it was today, so Bowdern decides to research the very well-known exorcism of Emma Schmidt. She had shown very similar signs of possession as Roland was showing, and she needed 23 straight days of exorcism just to become free. And I guess there's like 4 stages of possession. The first is a clear sign that there's some kind of dark presence. The second is experiencing physical attacks from a demon. The third is mental attacks from a demon. And then the final one is full-blown possession. Roland was already experiencing the first 3 signs, so the priest wanted to get in there like ASAP to start a formal exorcism before he even got to the 4th stage. At this point, Father Bowdern makes a ringy-dingy to the Archbishop out in DC and says, do you think maybe you could do the exorcism? Bowdern didn't really feel he had the qualifications or that he was spiritually ready for this job, and so he didn't want to fuck shit up. But the Archbishop says, sorry, bud, you have no choice, you have to do this. So Bowdern's like, well, shit. So, on March 16th of 49, he makes his way to Roland's new home for the first day of exorcism. Packed his little lunch, he's got a juice box, he is ready to go. No, he didn't. He was scared absolutely shitless. With him is Father Bishop, as well as a seminary student named Walter Halloran, who both volunteered to assist him. And I think it's safe to say that they were probably all equally as scared. They know that whatever the fuck is possessing Roland at any point could easily possess them, and like, who wants to deal with that? They've seen the bed shaking, they've seen books fly off shelf. This is a lot to take in for them. But they are determined to purge whatever's inside Roland, no matter what it costs and no matter how long it takes. This wasn't going to be some high noon shootout with some demon either. They had all done their research, their mental prep, like nobody was going into this to prove their bravery. Like any of us probably would be, the 3 of them were shaking in their boots. And the Archbishop told the 3 of them that this whole ordeal needed to be kept completely secret. But Bowdern's thinking, no, we need to document all of this, and so he actually kept a secret diary. He could tell already that this was an extreme case and he could make a little how-to manual for future exorcisms. But that diary that he kept is basically where this whole story is coming from. So, they begin their exorcism. They start by laying out some religious items, a crucifix, some holy water, a silk purple stole to wrap around the priest and the possessed, and they begin reading the rituals. And a moment, just one single moment after the prayer starts, the priest starts screaming out in horror because they're seeing all of these bloody claw marks appear on Roland's body. Roland writhed in pain as each new mark pierced him, and nobody had any idea where the next mark would be. The priests shout for the demon to reveal itself, but it refuses and Roland keeps writhing. They put crosses on him, holy objects, but nothing is working, and suddenly he screams out even louder and starts clawing at his chest. They unbutton his shirt and see the word help imprinted onto his skin as if stamped with a hot iron. And the priests are like, his hands were not tied up, but there's no way that he could have done this to himself. himself like we were watching him the whole time. After 9 hours of writhing from resistance, Roland finally collapses and falls asleep. Going into this, the priests were skeptical but scared about Roland's possession. Now they were just scared. Especially because now after the first exorcism, whatever was inside of Roland seemed to be getting stronger. So the next day they come back for a second exorcism, which, to the great relief of the priests, seemed to do the trick. By the third day, Roland was pretty much back to normal. He was playing like a 13-year-old, acting like he did before anything strange started happening, so the family thought, I'll be damned, the shit actually works. Gonna have to write you guys a Yelp review. But by that evening, Roland's mood switched like a light. When the priests arrived to continue the ritual, Roland is already turned into like a rabid animal. He's writhing around, snarling, and he's even biting the people holding him down. And the priests would hold holy items to his pillow trying to lure the demon out, but the closer that they got to him with it, the worse that he would get. Hours and hours went by until finally he began making retching noises like he was gonna vomit. At this point, nobody really knows what the hell is gonna happen, so they think, well, maybe he's gonna throw up the demon, so they rush across the room and open up the windows, just in case this demon flies out. After minutes of heaving, Roland finally throws up, and instantly there's like a calm hush in the room. Everyone's like, thank fuck, the demon is gone. But no, honey, not even close. They were dead wrong. That night at 2 a.m., Roland starts feeling weird feels inside his stomach. Not churning, but like actual movement, like something was inside of him trying to get out. So he starts screaming that the demon is coming back. I guess it was later found that it's actually quite common for the possessed person to be tricked into thinking that whatever was inside of them is out after they've thrown up. This makes everyone's guard go down, especially the priests who at this late hour had already headed home. But by 3 a.m. the priests were all called back because the family was realizing that the exorcism was far from over. So the gentlemen come back and they continue the exorcism ritual. Except now things are getting worse. The ground feels like it's vibrating. The walls sound like beams are breaking. At one point, one of the priests starts screaming in fright because he's standing at the foot of the bed and the mattress starts lifting up a foot off the ground and then crashes back down. None of them thought anything like this was possible, yet here they were witnessing it with their own eyes. And so the priests are like, just to make sure there's not like a gas leak and we're just going a little bit crazy, let's bring a scientist, Professor Bub, in and he can observe. So the professor comes into the room, sits in the corner to take notes, and is very skeptical and very calm. That is, until the priests begin their ritual and he sees the fucking nightstand lift up, and he knows, yeah, magnetic forces can cause levitation, but this shit is unreal. And the priests had done their research. They knew that in previous exorcisms, levitation was very, very common. It was used as a scare tactic. So, as scary as it may be, if a person starts levitating, they were instructed to put their hand on the body and say a prayer while guiding it back down. What a job! Can you imagine coming home from work and somebody saying, well, how was your day? And you'd be like, it was good, but my arm's a little sore from pushing down levitating bodies all day. I joke, but ooh, that's creepy. Anyways, apart from the levitating mattress and nightstand, while the priests were doing their thing, objects started flying around the room as if somebody were throwing things at them. Dark, demonic sounds would just come out of nowhere, and after several days of this, it really started to take a toll on Roland's family. Within a week of starting Roland's exorcism, his mom goes into therapy for anxiety, stress, and serious depression over watching her son go through this. Everyone living under that roof was getting negatively affected. They were getting physically ill from lack of sleep, from stress. Whatever was living inside of Roland was affecting them all. Which brings us to March 23rd, day 8 of Roland's exorcism. At this point, Father Bowden decides that it would probably be best to get Roland out of this house, so he transfers him to the rectory of a local college church. But now the students there become concerned. They'd be walking to class and the rectory windows would just burst open and they'd hear this animalistic shrieking coming from inside like a constipated mongoose. This exorcism was causing so much unwanted attraction on the campus, but the priests had no choice. They had to continue. Every night they would begin and Roland would start writhing and shaking and start screaming vulgar threats at them, which only seemed to get even more vulgar after the stroke of midnight. And he was saying the types of things that a 13-year-old boy at that time really shouldn't have even known. I guess he didn't watch my channel then. But he would curse the priests and then the curses would turn into sexual language far beyond what probably any of us would ever say. And he would spit at them with incredible accuracy. Like these poor priests were just covered in loogies like Roland was shooting at a carnival. pool. And I don't know where all this liquid was coming from. Roland wasn't denied water, but he certainly really wasn't drinking that much, yet he was constantly emptying his bladder with copious amounts of urine. And things seemed to be coming out of every end of him, and it was so odoriferous that the priests would have to open up the windows just to breathe. Sounds like somebody had Chipotle. But after over a week of performing these exorcisms, it seemed as though Roland was actually getting stronger. He was showing unnatural signs of strength, like a constant adrenaline rush, and the 3 men that were holding him down wasn't enough. He would break free and start punching the priests in their face, a sign that, "Boh, this is just getting started." So just within 10 days, one priest has 100 stitches in his arm. They all have black eyes with bruises all over them. Roland ends up breaking one of the priest's noses with a punch. He kicks another in the groin and the priest vomits from pain. So they say, "I'm sorry, but he could not stay here in the rectory." So they pack him up and bring him back to his uncle's house. And I'm sure his family was just like, great. But over the next 4 days, Roland actually stays suspiciously calm. Let's take a suspicious shot for that. But they all know there is no way that this kid went from a demonic, writhing person to a normal kid overnight. That just doesn't happen. They knew that these days were like spinning a jack in the box, and they were just waiting for that crazy shit to pop out again. Which, of course it did. It started with Roland saying that he needs to draw something. His uncle was an architect, and so they had big sheets of paper which they gave to Roland, and Roland starts drawing these weird-ass symbols. The family calls the priests back to decipher these drawings, and they read, "I will stay 10 days and then return after 4 days are up. I am the devil himself." Well, guess what tonight is? The end of the 4th day. So that day, one of the priests suggests that Roland, who is brought up Lutheran, maybe be baptized as a Catholic. Family's like, "Okay, he seems normal now, so let's do it." Well, on the drive to the church, Roland becomes possessed again. He's flailing around in the back seat and eventually hurls himself to the front seat to try to take control of the wheel. The car is veering left and right uncontrollably, and the family almost dies in a crash at one point, but they end up arriving safely to the church. Roland is dragged in, kicking and screaming with an entire group of men holding him down, and he ends up getting very quickly baptized, but it doesn't work. When he arrives back home, he begins physically attacking his family. He wraps his hands around his aunt's neck and starts choking her. He's kicking, he's punching, he's screaming. He's basically doing the same thing that he would to the priests. And the priests are like, "Your family is not safe, Roland. You need to go back to Maryland." At this point, Roland has lost a quarter of his body weight. He looks like walking death. He needs serious treatment. Father Bowdern goes back with them to Maryland and searches all around Maryland for a hospital or convent that'll take Roland in. But after he describes to them what's happening to Roland, nobody will take him. They don't care if this is psychological or demonic. Nobody will touch Roland with a 10-foot pole. So they pack their shit back up and haul their asses back to St. Louis to try this exorcism thing again. And Father Bowdern was like, "I found us a local hospital. We can work inside their psych ward, and it's run by Catholic monks." And I guess this place was kind of known for performing rituals like this, but even so, word was spreading that there was this kid who was basically climbing up the walls. And at this time, it was Holy Week, which is one of the most sacred times for Catholics, but the week turns into absolute hell and chaos for the priests working with Roland. One of the monks later gave one single interview regarding what had happened just before he died. He said that during the exorcism, he saw Roland pull one of the purple shawls off of the priest, and within a split second, it was torn into shreds. And then a few moments later, Roland straightened up like a board and began levitating feet off of the mattress. Glass decanters were flying around the room, hitting walls, shattering into pieces, which hit the priests and cut open fresh wounds. And in the matter of just 3 weeks, Father Bowdern had lost 40 pounds because all he was doing was standing next to Roland performing rituals. He was covered in bruises and boils and bites and burns, but he was hell-bent on getting this thing out of Roland. A month goes by of straight-up exorcisms, and they continue on. They begin chaining holy relics all over Roland's body, which start to burn his skin. Then Roland starts shaking and laughing maniacally and begins talking in a deep, low man's voice, telling the priests that Roland is his prisoner and that Roland has to say one word to get him out of his body, a word that Roland would never say. Well, that day, one of the priests bring in a small figurine statue of St. Michael, and Roland starts seizing and foaming at the mouth, and he's overcome by an entirely new voice. A voice that claimed to be St. Michael and demanded that the devil get out of this boy's body. Roland now starts convulsing even more violently than he ever had with any of the other exorcisms. And during those convulsions, he loses consciousness and starts having this vision. In this vision, he sees a large angelic figure of Saint Michael with a flaming sword holding back demons, screaming the word Dominos over and over again. And Roland was shaking so hard that his wounds all over his body were reopening and he was just oozing blood everywhere. But suddenly, at the height of his possessed state, the word Dominos begins echoing out of his mouth. He writhed in agony, his body twisting in contorted motions, screaming at the top of his lungs when suddenly, just as quick as the possession had started, he relaxed, sank back into his bed, and breathed out, saying, "He's gone." Immediately, Roland was back to normal. The seizures, the spitting, the deep voices, gone. But of course, Bowdern is skeptical. Has the demon actually left? After all, there had been multiple little breaks within their exorcism. So Bowdern asks for a sign that this is over, and within seconds, the whole campus is taken over by an ear-splitting boom. People start running in all directions, fearing an explosion, but the priests stay right there. After a minute or so, someone comes charging into the room and says that that loud noise had came from the church where a mysterious large figure of Saint Michael had appeared. Bowdern was like, "Okay, that's a good sign. I can go home now. Can kick back, go get some Denny's, call it a day." But other than the diary that was kept, none of the priests spoke about anything that happened, even on their deathbed. They stayed completely hush about it. Stories were kind of leaked to the press, but the final report of the exorcism is locked away in the Roman Catholic archives. So really, like, who knows? Afterwards, though, Roland actually led a pretty damn good life. He went to school, became a NASA rocket scientist. He has so many patents for things that he created for them. He got married, he had kids, and he had a very fulfilling life. I have no idea if he's still alive. By now, he'd be well into his 80s, and I know that he's never ever spoken about what's happened. But I know the hospital that Roland had stayed at in St. Louis has had several residual signs of the exorcism. For example, I guess a black hand stain would always appear over the bed Roland stayed in, and even when they'd paint over it, it would always reappear. People would hear things in that room, and even just walking by it, people would get the chills. But after Roland's exorcism, they ended up getting rid of all the furniture in that room. Like, they did not want to fuck around with anything, and I think they actually ended up tearing that wing down. But before demolition, the crew was going room to room just to make sure everyone was out of it, and they found a locked room with just a single desk right in the middle of the room. Like, how fucking creepy. And when they opened the drawer in the desk, there was one handmade book that mentioned an exorcism, which turned out to be a copy of the diary that was kept, which is where we get this story from. And investigators also found that one of the priests working with Roland had taken on the demon, and they were actually housed at a hospital and tied up 24/7 until the priest died sometime in the 80s. But I guess they were kept in a locked and secured room because objects in the room would fly all over the place, just like they did with Roland. And I don't know if the writer of The Exorcist knew that that had happened, but in the movie, spoiler alert, one of the priests ends up taking the demon on and then taking their own life. So maybe that's a coinkydink, but it is suspicious, so here's that. So you can totally see how the movie The Exorcist was definitely inspired by these events. It's like they took all the shit that happened with Roland and smushed it into a tighter timeline so it seemed even more dramatic. Not that Roland's wasn't dramatic. Like, no, his head didn't turn all the way around, his skin didn't turn pasty and green, but a lot of shit that did happen in the movie did also happen to Roland, allegedly. So now that we had the juicy story out of the way, I do want to say that there were investigations into this, and there was no evidence that any of this actually happened. In other words, everything was basically just hearsay. Psychologists thought he had mental issues, priests thought he was possessed, writers just thought this was a great story, and no matter who the story came from, it seemed like the story kind of stretched to fit their own agenda. So I guess it's kind of up to you what you want to believe. Please be respectful, talk amongst yourselves in the comments below. I'm very curious to know what you think about all this. Either way, this was definitely interesting. I need to zhuzh my hair up. Do you guys want to see what this wig actually looks like? Hold on, let's make her pretty again. There we go. Ooh, let's pull it back a little bit more. We love an 8 head. Oh my God, I just saw myself smile. Hi, my name's Dolores. Have you tried Avon lately? Anyways, my loves, this was an absolute blast. Not necessarily the topic, that was a bit dark, but still a fun story to tell. And thank you so much for being here and humoring an old woman. Y'all know my little spiel. If you'd like to support me and my channel just a little bit more, please feel free to join us over on Patreon. It's patreon.com/Poplux. There you get videos a day early, you get Patreon only content, plus best part, it is cheap, fun, and fancy, just like me. And like always, please be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell down below so that you're notified anytime I upload a new video. Don't forget that my newest collection of highlighters, including Black Ice, which does change from black to white, will be available again soon at thepoplix.com. Also, my latest album, Kiss of Fame, is available everywhere online that music is sold. Thank you so much to everyone who's supporting them. Comment down below, let me know what you thought of this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. You can follow me on Snapchat, Instagram, and Twitter at OfficialNady, and you can follow me online at thepoplix.com. Thank you so much for watching. I love you all, and I will see you again soon. Bye!